Are you joining soon? Okay, I think you are.
Should I join on mobile?
Yeah, yeah. So that the Twitter Space listeners can hear.
Okay. And
Uh,
then how does this work in terms of muting things and stuff to make sure?
so we'll mute our computers, and then we'll do everything on Twitter Space. But I
Okay,
just want a higher quality recording on local machines
I
for
got
the
you.
future listeners on the podcast. You know what I mean?
Okay, sounds good.
Um, Alessio, I'm still waiting for you to join. Sorry, folks, we're having some technical issues to join, and I think we're also going to be getting Simon Willison to join us at some point, which we're always excited about. He's a friend. Uh, okay, Travis, I see you here. Okay, and for those who don't know, we are discussing the the Google the leaked Google memo. I'm just gonna pin Simon's write up here, and y'all can chat about it, or at least read up if you don't know what the context of this thing is. All right, so I've pinned it to the top of the space. Travis, I'm inviting you as a speaker or as a co-host. And then Brandon, what's up, Brandon? Um, Alessio, I'm trying to get you to join, but you're not joining, and I don't know why. Are we okay?
Yeah. Hey.
What is up, Travis? Okay, yeah. Okay, Alessio's joining on StreamYard. All right, we're almost there, guys. We're almost there. Okay, we
Okay.
have high quality recordings.
By the way, right, we were Alex and I were totally hosting a space before this, and I told all of our listeners to just come straight over here. So
Oh, thanks. Oh, I didn't mean to like overlap with you guys. I
no,
mean,
no, no. I was already planning on cutting it off at the hour, and this is just I wanted
yeah.
to talk about this. So awesome.
Hey Simon, how's it going?
It's good. I'm not at home, so I'm out and about, but I have headphones and stuff, so hopefully this will work.
Yes. So so the reason we're on two platforms today. We're StreamYard and we are on Twitter Spaces. And this is for basically like a public discussion and high quality recording for our podcast. Are you able to join both? Or do you want to join later when you're back home?
I'm not going to be home, so I need something that'll work. So I'm on StreamYard right now on my phone. I don't know if I can connect to Spaces as well. Should I just join the Twitter Spaces?
Yeah, I think that's probably the better
Okay,
channel.
I'll jump into that now.
Thanks, Simon. Okay, let me make sure I get this all right. Okay, so we're gonna be maining Twitter Space, and then the backup StreamYard is the backup recording for higher quality audio. All right, Alessio. So I need you to join as a speaker on.
I don't know. I'm in the space, but how do I accept it? I'm from my computer.
Yeah, you can't join from your computer. It has to be on your phone.
Yeah, I'm in it as a listener, but I don't see the invite to speak.
I have invited you. Hey, Simon, you're here.
Hi, yeah, I'm. If this is working, then that's great.
Okay, we're almost there. Alessio is still figuring out some issues. You may need to restart your phone or something, Alessio. Travis, is my audio okay? Because you're the audio expert here.
I don't know about that, but yeah, you sound great, dude.
Okay, awesome. All right, so I think we can kick it off. Today we have an emergency podcast. We do this every now and then for breaking news, and we are talking about the leaked Google Doc, leaked, quote unquote leaked. I think Simon's at like an 8 out of 10 on whether or not this is authentic.
I'm at a 9 out of 10 now. I'm pretty confident.
Okay, actually, Simon, you're a very you have probably spent the most time on this. Would you like to introduce things, and I can follow up?
Sure, absolutely, I can do that. So yeah, this is a document which I first saw at 3 o'clock this morning, I think. It claims to be leaked from Google. There's good reasons to believe it is leaked from Google. And to be honest, if it's not, it doesn't actually matter because the quality of the analysis in this document, I think, stands alone. If this was just a document by some anonymous person, I'd still think it was interesting and worth discussing. And the title of the document is "We Have No Moat and Neither Does OpenAI." And the argument it makes is that while Google and OpenAI have been competing on training bigger and bigger language models, the open source community is already starting to outrun them, given only a couple of months of really serious activity. Facebook Llama was the thing that really kicked us off. There were open source language models like Bloom before that, and GPTJ, and they weren't very impressive. Like, nobody was really thinking that they were ChatGPT equivalent. Facebook Llama came out in March, I think March 15th, and was the first one that really sort of showed signs of being as capable, maybe, as ChatGPT. I think all of these models, they've been, the analysis of them has tended to be a bit hyped. Like, I don't think anything are even quite up to GPT 3.5 standards yet, but they're within spitting distance in some respects. So anyway, Llama came out, and then 2 weeks later, Stanford Alpaca came out, which was fine-tuned on top of Llama and was a massive leap forward in terms of quality. And then a week after that, Vicuna came out, which is, to this date, the best model I've been able to run on my own hardware. And I've run it on my mobile phone now. Like, it's astonishing how little resources you need to run these things. But anyway, the argument that this paper makes, which I found very convincing, is it only took open source 2 months to get this far. It's now every researcher in the world is kicking in on new things. It feels like there are problems that Google has been trying to solve that the open source models are already addressing. And really, how do you compete with that? Like, if you've got a sort of closed ecosystem, how are you going to beat these open models with all of this innovation going on? But then the most interesting argument in there is it talks about the size of models and says that maybe large isn't a competitive advantage. Maybe actually a smaller model with lots of different people fine-tuning it and having these LoRa, L-O-R-A, stackable fine-tuning innovations on top of it, maybe those can move faster, and actually having to retrain your giant model every few months from scratch is way less useful than having small models that you can fine-tune in a couple of hours on a laptop. So it's fascinating. I basically, if you haven't read this thing, you should read every word of it. It's not very long. It's beautifully written. I mean, if you try and find the quotable lines in it, almost every line of it's quotable.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the status of this thing.
That's a wonderful summary, Simon. There's so many angles we can take to this. I'll just observe one thing, which if you think about the open versus closed narrative, Imad Mostak, who is the CEO of Stability, has always been said that open will trail behind closed because the closed alternatives can always take learnings and lessons from open source. And this is the first highly credible statement that is basically saying the exact opposite, that open source is moving faster than closed source, and they are scared. They seem to be scared, which is interesting. Travis, Alessio?
Yeah, a few things that I'll say. The only thing which can keep up with the pace of AI these days is open source. And I think we're seeing that unfold in real time before our eyes. And I think the other interesting angle of this is, to some degree, LLMs they don't really have switching costs. They are going to become commoditized. At least that's what a lot of people kind of think. And to what extent is it a race to the bottom in terms of pricing of these things, and they all kind of become roughly the same in terms of their underlying abilities, and open source is going to be actively pushing that forward, and then this is kind of coming from, if it is to be believed, the kind of Google or an insider type mentality around where is the actual competitive advantage, what should they be focusing on, how can they get back into the game, when currently the external view of Google is that they're kind of spinning their wheels and they have this code red, and it's like they're playing catch up already. Like, could they use the open source community and work with them, which is going to be really, really hard, from a structural perspective, given Google's place in the ecosystem. But a lot of jumping off points there.
Yeah, I think to me the main thing was the conclusion of it, which most of the post was focused on research and how do you get the best model. But the same thing we've seen in open source is one thing is having the project, one thing is running
Unless
it.
you're
right?
muted. Oh.
No.
Unless you'll need to unmute on mobile on your Twitter Space.
Oh my God.
Oh God, we're
Okay, I'm trying to figure out how to not. Can people hear me on Twitter Spaces too? I'm just trying to
Yep,
use the
yep,
right
yep.
mic for both. Uh, I was gonna say I think the post is really focused on how do we get the best model, but it's not focused on like how do you build the best product around it. A lot of these models are limited by how many GPUs you can get to run them, and we've seen on traditional open source, like everybody can use some of these projects like, Kafka and like Elastic for free, but the reality is that not everybody can afford to run the infrastructure needed for it. So I think like the main takeaway that I have from this is like a lot of the modes are probably around just getting the sand, so to speak, and having the GPUs to actually serve these models. Because even if the best model is open source, like running it at large scale for an enterprise is not easy, and like it's not super convenient to get a lot of the infrastructure. And we've seen that model work in open source, where you have the open source project and then you have a enterprise cloud hosted version for it. I think that's going to look really different in open source models, because just hosting a model doesn't have a lot of value. So I'm curious to hear how people end up getting rewarded to do open source. We figured that out in infrastructure, but we haven't figured it out in LLMs yet.
It is. Just for completion, I've been following all of your posts. Oh, sorry. Yes. I just want to follow up. Simon, you said you're running a model on your phone. Which model is it? And I don't think you've written it up.
Yeah, that one's Vicuna. Did I write it up? I did. I've got a blog post about how it knows who I am, sort of, but it said that I invented a pattern for living called the bear or bunny pattern, which I definitely didn't. But I love that my phone decided that I did. And yeah, it's
Okay. It looks like
Simon. It's only available that runs on my.
So is Simon cutting in and out for anyone?
Yeah, he's cutting in out.
Simon, your reception doesn't seem that great wherever you're walking, and I hope it's a nice walk.
It is a lovely walk. I'm hoping I can find a beach in a park, a bench in a park. So I will be stable very shortly.
Okay, no, but it's great. I will hunt for that, because I'm not yet running Vicuña on my phone, and I feel like I should, and as like a very base thing. But I'll follow up two things, right? Like one, I'm very interested in LoRa, and let's talk about that a little bit more, because this concept of stackable improvements to models, I think, is extremely interesting. Like I would love to npm install abilities onto my models, right? Which is really awesome. But the first thing, which I think is under discussed, is I don't get the panic. Like honestly, like Google has the most moats. I was arguing maybe like 3 months ago on my blog, like Google has the most moat out of a lot of people, because hey, we have your calendar, hey, we have your email, hey, we have your Google Docs. Like, isn't that a sufficient moat? Like, why are these guys panicking so much? I still don't get it. Like, sure, open source is running ahead, and like it's on device and whatever, what have you, but they have so much more moat. Like, what are we talking about here? Like it's what Alessio was saying. It's like product moat versus product mode versus like I guess language model mode. There's many dimensions to compete on.
Yeah, there's like one of the things that the author mentions in here is when you start to have the feeling of what we're trailing behind, then your brightest researchers jump ship and go to OpenAI or go to work at academia or whatever, and like the talent drain at the level of the senior AI researchers that are pushing these things ahead within Google, I think is a serious concern. And my take on it's a good point, right? Like what Google has moats, they're not running out of money anytime soon. I think they do see the level of the defensibility and the fact that they want to be a leader, and for a long time they have been the leader around pretty much anything tech first. And there's definitely have lost that feeling, right? And to what degree they can work with the open source community to get that back and help drive that. All of the Llama subset of models with Alpaca and Vicuna, et cetera, that all came from Meta, right? Like that, yeah, like it's not licensed in an open way where you can build a company on top of it, but Meta is now kind of driving this family of models. Like there's a tree of models that they're leading, and where is Google in that playbook? Like for a long time, they were the one releasing those models, being super open, and now it's just they seem to be trailing, and there's people jumping ship, and to what degree can they close off those wounds and focus on where they have unique ability to gain momentum. I think is a core part of my takeaway from this.
Yeah, and I think another big thing in the post is, as long as you have high quality data, like you don't need that much data, you can just use that. The first party data loops are probably going to be the most important going forward, if we do believe that this is true. So Databricks, we had Mike Conover from Databricks on the podcast, and they talked about how they came up with the training set for DALL-E, which they basically had Databricks employees write down very good questions and very good answers for it. Not every company has the scale to do that. And I think, products like Google, they have millions of people writing Google Docs, they have millions of people using Google Sheets, they have millions of people writing stuff, creating content on YouTube. The question is, if you want to compete against these companies, maybe the model is not what you're going to do it with, because the open source kind of commoditizes it. But how do you build even better data first party loops? And that's kind of the hardest thing for startups, right? Like, even if we open up the models to everybody and everybody can just go on GitHub or Hugging Face and get the weights to the best model, how do I get enough people to generate data for me so that I can still make it good? That's what I would be worried about if I was a new company. How do I make that happen really quickly?
Convinced that the data is that big a challenge. So there's this project. So the problem with Facebook Llama is that it's not available for commercial use. So people are now trying to train a alternative to Llama that's entirely on openly licensed data. And the biggest project around that is this Red Pajama project, which they released their training data a few weeks ago, and it was 2.7 terabytes, right? So actually tiny, right? You can buy a laptop that you can fit 2.7 terabytes on. But it was the same exact data that it was effectively the same thing that Facebook Llama had been trained on. Because for your base model, you're not really trying to teach it facts about the world. You're just trying to teach it how English and other languages work, how they fit together. And then the real magic is when you fine tune on top of that. That's what Alpaca did on top of Llama and so on. And the fine tuning sets, it looks like you only need like tens of thousands of examples to kick one of these raw models into shape. And tens of thousands of examples, like Databricks spent a month and got the 2,000 employees of their company to help kick in, and it worked. You've got the Open Assistant project and crowdsourcing the stuff now as well. So it's achievable.
Okay, looks like Simon has.
You okay, Simon?
Yeah, I think he has a cough or some sore throat. I agree. I think it's a fascinating point. Actually, so I've heard through the grapevine that Red Pajama's model, trained on the data that they released, is going to be releasing tomorrow, and it's a very exciting time because there's a couple more models that are coming down the pike, which is independently reproduced. And so yeah, everyone is challenging all these assumptions from first principles, which is fascinating. I did wanted to like try to get a little bit more technical in terms of like the specific points raised, because this doc was just amazing. Can we talk about LoRa? I'll open it up to Simon again if he's back.
I'd rather someone else take on LoRa. I know as much as I've read in that paper, but not much more than that.
So I thought this was kind of like an optimization technique. So LoRa stands for low rank adaptation. But this is the first mention of LoRa as a form of stackable improvements, where I forget what. Let me just Google this. But obviously, anyone who is more knowledgeable, please come on in.
All I've learned is through ChatGPT. I spent about 20 minutes on GPT-4 trying to figure out what LoRa was. I study computer science, but this is not my area of expertise. What I got from it is that basically, instead of having to retrain the whole model, you can just pick one of the ranks, and you take one of like the weight matrices and like make two smaller matrices from it, and then just use those two to be retrained instead of retraining the whole model. So
all these techniques you freeze part of the thing and then you just train a smaller part. Like
exactly.
that seems to be an area of a lot of fruitful research.
Yeah,
I think Mini GPT-4 recently did something similar as well. And then there's a sparse model people out today that are also doing the same thing.
And
lots of LoRa, the stable diffusion community have been using LoRa a lot. So that in that case, they had the thing I've seen is people releasing LoRa's that are like, you train a concept like a particular person's face or something, you release, and the LoRa version of this ends up being megabytes of data, like which is it's small enough that you can just trade those around, and you can effectively load multiple of those into the model. But what I hadn't realized is that you can use the same trick on language models. That was one of the big new things for me in reading the leaked Google paper today.
Yeah, and I think the point they make around owning the infrastructure, so what ChatGPT has told me is that when you're figuring out what rank you actually want to do this fine-tuning at, you can have either go too low and like the model doesn't actually learn it, or you can go too high and the model overfits those learnings. So if you have a base model that everybody agrees on, then all the subsequent like LoRa work is done around the same rank, which gives you an advantage. And the point they made in the article is that since Llama has been the base for a lot of this LoRa work, like they own the mind share of the community. So everything that they're building is compatible with their architecture. But if Google open sources their own model, the rank that they chose for LoRa on Llama might not work on the Google model. So all of the existing work is not portable.
But then if you retrain that base model, all of those LoRa's become invalid, right? They're essentially, they're built for an exact model version. So this means that being the big company with all of the GPUs that can afford to retrain a model every 3 months, that's suddenly not nearly as valuable as it used to be. Because now maybe there's an open source model that's 5 years old at this point and has like multiple stacks of LoRa's trained all over the world on top of it, which can outperform your brand new model just because there's been so much more iteration on that base.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I think Jim Fan from NVIDIA was recently making this argument for transformers. Like even if we do come up with a better architecture than transformers, the sheer hundreds and millions of dollars that have been invested on top of transformers make it actually there is some switching cost, and it's not exactly obvious that better architecture equals we should all switch immediately tomorrow.
It's kind of like the difficulty of launching a new programming language today is that Python and JavaScript have 1 million packages. So no matter how good your new language is, if it can't tap into those existing package libraries, it's not going to be useful for a long time.
Yes.
Which is why Mojo, the new language, is so clever, because they did build on top of Python, so they get all of that existing infrastructure, all of that existing code working already.
I mean, what we've got you, since you're co-creator Django and all that, do we want to take a diversion into Mojo? Because I'm fascinated. yeah, like Travis, you had something to say, or Simon? Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
no, I'd be happy to jump in and get Simon's take on Mojo. One small point on Laura is, I just think if you think about at a high level what the major downsides are of these large language models, it's the fact that they're difficult to train, right? They tend to hallucinate, and they have a static, like they were trained at a certain date, right? And with Laura, I think it makes it a lot more amenable to training new updates on top of that like base model on the fly, where you can incorporate new data and in a way that is an interesting and potentially more optimal alternative than doing the kind of in context generation, because most of like perplexity.ai or any of these approaches currently, it's like all based off of doing real-time searches and then injecting as much into the local context window as possible, so that you try to ground your language model both in terms of the information it has access to, that helps to reduce hallucinations. It can't completely reduce it, but helps to reduce it, and then also gives it access to up-to-date information that wasn't around for that massive like pre-training step. And I think Laura, in my understanding, really makes it more amenable to having constantly shifting lightweight pre-training on top of it that scales better than normal fine-tuning. Yeah, that was just kind of my one takeaway there.
Models on my own hardware. I don't actually care about their factual content. Like, I don't need a model that's trained on the most up-to-date things. What I need is a model that can do the Bing and Bard trick, right? That can tell when it needs to run a search and then go and run a search to get extra information and bring that context in. And similarly, I want it to be able to operate tools where it can access my email or look at my notes or all of those kinds of things. And I don't think you need a very powerful model for that. Like, that's one of the things where I feel like, yeah, Vicuna running on my laptop is probably powerful enough to drive a sort of personal research assistant, which can look things up for me, and it can summarize things in my own notes, and it can do all of that. And I don't care that it doesn't know about the Ukraine war, because the Ukraine war happened since the training cutoff. That doesn't matter if it's got those additional capabilities, which are quite easy to build. The reason everyone's going crazy building agents and tools right now is that it's a few lines of Python code and a sort of couple of paragraphs of prompt to get it to work.
Well, let's maybe dig in on that a little bit, and this also is very related to Mojo, because I do think there are use cases and domains where having the hyper optimized version of these models running on device is very relevant, where you can't necessarily make API calls out on the fly and do context augmented generation. And I was talking with a researcher at Lockheed Martin yesterday, literally about like the version of this that's running of language models running on fighter jets, right? And you talk about like the amount of engineering precision and optimization that has to go into those type of models, and the fact that you spend so much money like training a super distilled version where milliseconds matter, it's a life or death situation there. And you couldn't even remotely have a use case there where you could like call out and have API calls or something. So I do think there's like keeping in mind the different use cases where there'll be use cases that I'm more excited about, at the application level, where I want to just have it be super flexible and be able to call out to APIs and have this agentic type thing. And then there's also industries and use cases where you really need everything baked into the model, and yeah.
From Nathan at every.2, which I think, I see the 100 score over there. Simon, do you have a few seconds on Mojo?
Sure. So Mojo is a brand new programming language. It was just announced a few days ago. It's not available yet. I think there's an online demo, but presuming it becomes an open source language we can use, it's got really some very interesting characteristics. It's a superset of Python. So anything written in Python will just work, but it adds additional features on top that let you basically do very highly optimized code written in Python syntax, but that compiles down. The main thing that's exciting about it is the pedigree that it comes from. It's a team led by Chris Latner. Chris Latner built LLVM and Clang, and then he designed Swift at Apple. So he's got like three for three on extraordinarily impactful high-performance computing products. And he put together this team, and they're trying to go after the problem of how do you build a language which you can do really high-performance optimized work in, but where you don't have to do everything again from scratch. And that's where building on top of Python is so clever. So I wasn't, like, if this thing came along, I didn't really pay attention to it until Jeremy Howard, who built Fast AI, put up a very detailed blog post about why he was excited about Mojo, which included there's a video demo in there which everyone should watch, because in that video, he takes matrix multiplication implemented in Python, and then he uses the Mojo extras to 2000x the performance of that matrix multiplication. Like, he adds a few static type functions and a sort of struct instead of a class, and he gets 2000 times the performance out of it, which is phenomenal. Like, absolutely extraordinary. So yeah, and that got me really excited. Like, the idea that we can still use Python and all of this stuff we've got in Python, but we can just very slightly tweak some things and get literally like 1,000 times upwards performance out of the things that matter. That's really exciting.
Yeah, I'm curious, like, how come this wasn't thought of before? It's not like the concept of a language superset is completely new, but as far as I know, all the previous Python interpreter approaches, like the alternative runtime approaches, are, like they're more sort of fit conforming to standard Python, but never really tried this additional approach of augmenting the language. I wonder if you have any insights there on like why is this a breakthrough?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So Jeremy Howard's piece talks about this thing called MLIR, which I hadn't heard of before, but this was another Chris Latner project. He built LLVM as a low-level virtual machine that you could build compilers on top of. And then MLIR was this one that he initially kicked off at Google. And I think it's part of TensorFlow and things like that. But it was very much optimized for multiple cores and GPU access and all of that kind of thing. And so my reading of Jeremy Howard's article is that they basically built Mojo on top of MLIR. So they had a huge starting point where they knew this technology better than anyone else. And because they had this very, very robust, high-performance basis that they could build things on, I think maybe they're just the first people to try and build try and combine a high-level language with MLIR with some extra things. So it feels like they're basically taking a whole bunch of ideas people have been sort of experimenting with over the last decade and bundled them all together with exactly the right team, the right level of expertise, and it looks like they've got the thing to work. But yeah, I mean, I'm very intrigued to see, especially once this is actually available and we can start using it. Jeremy Howard is someone I respect very deeply, and he's hyping this thing like crazy. Right? His headline, and he's not the kind of person who hypes things if they're not worth hyping. He said Mojo may be the biggest programming language advanced in decades, and from anyone else, I'd kind of ignore that headline, but from him, it really means something.
Yes, because he doesn't hype things up randomly. Yeah, and he's a noted skeptic of Julia, which is also another data science hot topic. But from the TypeScript and web development worlds, there has been a dialect of TypeScript that was specifically optimized to compile to WebAssembly, which I thought was like promising, and then eventually it never really took off. But I like this approach because I think more frameworks should essentially be languages and recognize that there are language supersets and maybe work on compilers that work on them. And then that is by the way, that's the direction that React is going right now. So fun times.
So TypeScript's an interesting comparison, actually, because TypeScript is effectively a superset of JavaScript.
It is, but there's no performance angle. It's purely types, right?
Gotcha. Right. So I guess Mojo is the superset of Python, but the emphasis is absolutely on tapping into the performance stuff.
Well,
right, which is
the,
things
the,
people actually care about.
Yeah, the one thing I found is interesting is very similar to the early days of TypeScript. There was the most important thing was that it's incrementally adoptable, because people had large JavaScript code bases and they wanted to incrementally like add the main value prop for TypeScript was reliability and the static typing. And with Mojo, like I could totally see it being basically anyone who's a target, a large enterprise user of Mojo, or even researchers, like they're all going to be coming from a hardcore background in Python and have large existing libraries. And the question will be, for what use cases will Mojo be like a really good fit for that incremental adoption, where you can still tap into your massive like Python existing infrastructure, workflows, data tooling, etc. And what does that path to adoption look like?
Yeah, we don't know because it's a waitlisted language, which people were complaining about. The Mojo creators were like saying something about they had to scale up their servers, and I'm like, what language requires a central server? So it's a little bit sus, a little bit like there's a cloud product already in place, and they're waiting for it. But we'll see. I think Mojo is actually promising, and I actually want more programming language innovation this way. I was complaining a few years ago that programming language innovation is all about stronger types, all about like more functional, more strong types everywhere. And then this is the first one that's actually much more practical, which I really enjoy. This is why I wrote about self-provisioning runtimes.
And I mean, this is kind of related to the post, right? Like if you stop all of a sudden, we're like the models are all the same and we can improve them. Like where can we get the improvements? It's like better runtimes, better languages, better tooling, better data collection.
Yeah.
So if I were a founder today, I wouldn't worry as much about the model maybe, but I would say, okay, what can I build into my product? And or what can I do at the engineering level that maybe it's not model optimization because everybody's working on it. But like you said, it's like, why haven't people thought of this before? It's like, it's definitely super hard, but I'm sure that if you're like Google or you're like OpenAI or you're like Databricks, you got smart enough people that can think about these problems. So hopefully we see more of this.
You need Chris Lanner. Okay, I promise to keep this relatively tight. I know Simon is out on a beautiful day. It is a very nice day in California. I wanted to go through a few more points that you have pulled out, Simon, and just give you the opportunity to rant and riff and what have you. Are there any other points from going back to the sort of Google OpenAI moat documents that you felt like we should dive in on?
I mean, the really interesting stuff there is the strategy component, right? This idea that that Facebook accidentally stumbled into leading this space just because they put out this model that everyone else is innovating on top of. And there's a very open question for me as to would Facebook relicense Llama to allow for commercial usage?
Yeah, is there some rumor? Is that today?
Is there a rumor about that? That would be interesting.
Yeah, I saw something about Zuck saying that he would release the Llama weights officially.
Oh my goodness, no, that I admit, that's huge.
Let me confirm the tweet. Let me find the tweet and then yeah.
Okay, because I met somebody from Facebook machine learning research a couple of weeks ago, and I pressed them on this, and they said basically they don't think it'll ever happen because if it happens and then somebody does horrible fascist stuff with this model, all of the headlines will be Mark Zuckerberg releases a monster into the world. So a couple of weeks ago, his feeling was that it's just too risky for them to allow it to be used like that. But a couple of weeks is a couple of months in the AI world. So yeah, it wouldn't be. It feels to me like strategically Facebook should be jumping right on this because this puts them at the very lead of open source innovation around this stuff.
So I've pinned a tweet talking about Zuck saying that Meta will open up Llama. It's from the founder of Obsidian, which gives it a slight bit more credibility, but it is the only tweet that I can find about it. So completely unsourced. We shall see. I mean, I have friends within Meta. I should just go ask them. But yeah, I mean, one interesting angle on the memo actually is that, and they were linking to this in the doc, which is apparently like Facebook got a bunch of people to do, because they never released it for commercial use, but a lot of people went ahead anyway and optimized and build extensions and stuff. They got a bunch of free work out of open source, which is an interesting strategy. There's okay. I don't know if I have to like.
Oh, I've got an exciting piece of news. I've just heard from somebody with contacts at Google that they've heard people in Google confirm the leak, that document was indeed a legit Google document, which I don't find surprising at all. But I'm now up to a 10 out of 10 on whether that's real.
Excellent. Yeah, it is fascinating. Yeah, I mean, the strategy is really interesting. I think Google has been definitely sleeping on monetizing. You know, I heard someone call when Google Brain and DeepMind merged that it was like something like you know, goodbye to the Xerox PARC of our era. And it definitely feels like Google X and Google Brain were definitely Xerox PARCs of our era, and I guess we all benefit from that.
So one thing I'll say about the Google side of things, like there was a question earlier, why are Google so worried about this stuff? And I think it's just all about the money. You know, the engine of money at Google is Google search and Google search ads.
Yeah.
And anyone who uses ChatGPT on a daily basis like me will have noticed that their usage of Google has dropped like a stone, because there are many, many questions that ChatGPT, which shows you no ads at all, is a better source of information for than Google now. And so, yeah, it doesn't surprise me that Google would see this as an existential threat, because whether or not they can be, you know, Bard, it's not great, but it exists, but it doesn't have an ads in it yet either. And if I've got a chatbot that's not showing me ads and chatbot that is showing me ads, I'm going to pick the one that's not showing me ads.
Yeah, I agree. I did see a prototype of Bing with ads, Bing Chat with ads.
I haven't seen the prototype yet. No.
Yeah. Anyway, it will come obviously, and then we will choose. We'll go out of our way to avoid ads, just like we always do. We'll need ad blockers in chat. Excellent.
Yeah, one thing on the open source versus closed side of things, you know, going back to an earlier point and the whole kind of thesis of this post. You know, I still view without a doubt like GPT-4 as the kind of lead in this industry, and it's proprietary, and you know, now they're being a lot more careful about actually even releasing information about, you know, how they trained it and the models, you know, architecture and everything. There is something to be said for, as we inch closer towards more powerful foundational models, having the ability to actually shut them off, or have an API that you can literally just turn off if shit hits the fan. And you know, I think we're kind of seeing that there, if you have an open model at GPT-4, and you know what Alpaca showed is that you can essentially like fine tune and train on the outputs of that at scale. Like even just having that open and having the ability to call into that and generate inputs and outputs, you can replicate it to some degree. The open source models are not there yet. Like it's still trailing, but the rate of progress is there, and whether or not that will fundamentally like surpass the private models, or whether or not these large incumbents, and whether it's OpenAI or Meta or Google, like whether or not they can or should be focusing on the largest versions of these models strategically, I don't know. There's so many pieces there, but yeah, I do think like a fundamental aspect of the safety and the alignment side of this is the fact that if you have a hosted model and it's something you can control, that you can have the ability to just shut it off if things, you know, start to go wrong.
The science fiction scenarios, the AI breaking out and killing all humans and creating viruses and all of that kind of thing, the sort of the Terminator stuff. And then there's the people doing bad things with AI. And that latter one is the one that I think is much more interesting. And, you know, because things like romance scams, right? Romance scams already take billions of dollars from vulnerable people every year. Those are very easy to automate using existing tools. I'm pretty sure Vicuna 13B running on my laptop could spin up a pretty decent romance scam if I was evil and wanted to use it for that. So that's the kind of thing where I get really nervous about it. Like the fact that these models are out there and bad people can use these bad models to do bad things. Most importantly, at scale, like romance scamming, you don't need a language model to pull off one romance scam, but if you want to pull off 1,000 at once, a language model might be the thing that helps you scale to that point. And yeah, in terms of the science fiction stuff, and also like a model on my laptop that can guess what comes next in a sentence, I'm not worried that that's going to break out of my laptop and destroy the world. I get slightly nervous about the huge number of people who are trying to build AGIs on top of these models, the baby AGI stuff and so forth, but I don't think they're going to get anywhere. I feel like if you actually wanted a model that was a threat to humanity, a language model would be a tiny corner of what that thing was actually built on top of. You'd need goal setting and all sorts of other bits and pieces. So yeah, for the moment, the science fiction stuff doesn't really interest me, although it is a little bit alarming seeing more and more of the very senior figures in this industry sort of tip the hat and say, you know, we're getting a little bit nervous about this stuff now.
Yeah, so that would be Jeff Hinton and Yoshua Bengio. And I saw this meme this morning that Jan LeCun was like happily saying, "This is fine," being the third Turing Award winner.
But you'll see a lot of the AI safety, the people who've been talking about AI safety for the longest are getting really angry about the science fiction scenarios because they're like, no, the thing that we need to be talking about is the harm that you can cause with these models right now today, which is actually happening.
I agree.
And the science fiction stuff kind of ends up distracting from that.
I love it. Okay? So Eliezer, I don't know how to pronounce his name. Eliezer has a list of ways that AI will kill us post, and I think Simon, you could write a list of ways that AI will harm us but not kill us, right? Like the non-science fiction actual harm ways. I think I haven't seen an actual list of like, hey, romance scams, spam. I don't know what else, but that could be very interesting as a practical like here are the situations we need to guard against because they are more real today than that we need to think about, warn about. Obviously you've been a big advocate of prompt injection awareness, even though you can't really solve them, and I worked through a scenario with you, but yeah,
prompt injection is a whole other side of this, which is, I mean, that if you're at risk from AI, the risk right now is everyone who's building personal AI assistants are building systems that attackers can trivially subvert into stealing all of their private data, unlocking their house, all of that kind of thing. So that's another very real risk that we have today.
Yeah, I think in all our personal bios, we should edit in prompt injections already. Like on my website, I want to add in a personal prompt injection so that if I get scraped, like I'll know if someone's like reading from a script, right? That is generated by an AI bot.
I've seen people do that on LinkedIn already, and they get recruiter emails saying, "Hey, I didn't read your bio properly, and I'm just an AI script, but like a joke." Yeah, it's fascinating.
Okay, all right. So trying to stay roughly on topic. I think this moat is, it's a peek under the curtain of the internal panic within Google. I think it is very validated. I'm not so sure they should care so much about small models or like on-device models. But the other stuff is interesting. There was a comment at the end that you had, Simon, about as for OpenAI themselves, OpenAI doesn't matter, right? So this is a Google document talking about Google's position in the market and what Google should be doing. But they had a comment here about OpenAI. They also said OpenAI had no moat, which is a interesting and brave comment, given that OpenAI, is the leader in a lot of these innovations.
Well, one thing I will say is that I think we might have identified who within Google wrote this document now. There's a version of it floating around with a name. And I looked them up on LinkedIn. It doesn't look like they're heavily involved in the AI corner of Google. So my guess is that at Google, like I've done this when I've worked for companies, I'll put out a memo. I'll write up a Google doc and I'll email it around. And it's nowhere near the official position of the company or of the executive team. It's somebody's opinion. And so I think it's more likely that this particular document is somebody who works for Google and has an opinion and distributed internally, and then it got leaked. I don't know if it's necessarily represents Google's sort of institutional thinking about this. I think it probably should. Again, this is such a well-written document. It's so well argued that if I was an executive at Google and I read that, I would be thinking pretty hard about it. But yeah, I don't think we should see it as sort of the official secret internal position of the company.
Yeah. First of all, I might promote that person because he's clearly more.
Oh, definitely. He's really. I would hire this person on the strength of that document.
But second of all, this is more about OpenAI. Like I'm not interested in Google's official statements about OpenAI, but I'm just interested in like his assertion that OpenAI doesn't have a moat. that's a bold statement. I don't know. It's got the best people.
Well, I would say two things here. One, it's really interesting, just at a meta point, that they even approached it this way of having this public leak. It kind of talks a little bit to the fact that they felt that doing this internally like wasn't going to get anywhere, or maybe this speaks to some of the like middle management type stuff or within Google. And then to the point about like OpenAI not having a moat. I think for large language models, it will be over time kind of a race to the bottom, just because the switching costs are so low compared with traditional cloud and SaaS. And yeah, there will be differences in quality, but like over time, if you look at the limit of these things, like I think Sam Altman has been quoted a few times saying that the price of marginal price of intelligence will go to zero over time. And the marginal price of energy powering that intelligence will also head to zero over time. And in that world, if you're providing large language models, they become commoditized. Like, yeah, what is your moat at that point? I don't know. I think they're extremely well positioned as a team and as a company for leading this space. I'm not that worried about that, but it is something from a strategic point of view to keep in mind about large language models becoming a commodity.
Section. It says epilogue. What about OpenAI? All of this talk of open source can feel unfair given OpenAI's current closed policy. Why do we have to share if they won't? That's talking about Google sharing. But the fact of the matter is, we are already sharing everything with them in the form of the steady flow of senior researchers. Until we step that side, secrecy is a moot point. I love that. That's so salty. And in the end, OpenAI doesn't matter. They are making the same mistakes that we are in their posture relative to open source, and their ability to maintain an edge is necessarily in question. Open source alternatives can and will eventually eclipse them unless they change their stance. In this respect, at least, we can make the first move. So the argument this paper is making is that Google should go like Meta and just lean right into open sourcing it and engaging with the wider open source community much more deeply, which OpenAI have very much signaled they are not willing to do. But yeah, it's read the whole thing. The whole thing is full of little snippets like that. It's just super fun.
Yes, read the whole thing. I also appreciated the timeline because it said a lot of really great context for people who are out of the loop. So yeah.
And right. the final conspiracy theory said this got leaked right before Sundar and Satya and Sam all went to the White House this morning. So
yeah, did anything happen? I haven't caught up. They like the White House issued a statement.
No, that I just saw the photos of them going into the White House. I haven't seen any post meeting updates.
I think it's a big win for Anthropic to be at that table.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. And Cohere is not there. I was like, interesting.
Well, I mean, anyway. Yeah, they need some help. Okay. Well, I promise to keep this relatively tight. Spaces do tend to have a tendency of dragging on. But before we go, anything that you all want to plug? Anything that you're working on currently? Maybe go around. Simon, are you still working on Dataset?
I am. I'm having a bit of it. So Dataset's my open source project that I've been working on. It's about helping people analyze and publish data. I'm having an existential crisis of it at the moment because I've got access to the ChatGPT code interpreter mode, and you can upload a SQLite database to that, and it will do all of the things that are on my roadmap for the next 12 months.
Oh my God.
So that's frustrating. So I'm leaning Dataset. My interests in Dataset and AI are rapidly crossing over. I'm thinking a lot harder about the AI features that I need to build on top of Dataset to make sure it stays relevant in a world where ChatGPT can do most of the stuff that it does already. But yeah, the thing I'll plug, my blog, simonwillison.net, I am now updating it daily with stuff because AI moves so quickly. And I have a Substack newsletter, which is effectively my blog, but in email form, sent out a couple of times a week, which please subscribe to that, or RSS feed of my blog or whatever, because I'm trying to keep track of all sorts of things and I'm publishing a lot at the moment.
Yes, you are, and we love you very much for it because you are a very good reporter and technical deep diver into all the things. Thank you, Simon. Travis, are you ready to announce? So I guess you've announced it.
Yeah. So I'm. I just founded a company. I'm working on a framework for building reliable agents that aren't toys, and focused on more constrained use cases. I look at kind of AGI and these AutoGPT type projects as like jumping all the way to self-driving, and we kind of want to start with some more engineering rigor and really focus on reliable primitives to start that. And that'll be an open source TypeScript project. I'll be releasing the first version of that soon. And that's it. Follow me on here for this type of stuff. I love everything AI.
And spam his ChatGPT bot while you still can.
Oh yeah, the ChatGPT Twitter bot has about 125,000 followers now. It's still running. I'm not sure if it's whitelisted.
Earn your credits.
Yeah. Well,
Can you say how
it's
much you
actually.
spend, actually?
No. Well, I think probably totally like $1,000 or something. But it's sponsored by OpenAI, so I haven't actually spent any real money.
What? That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, once I changed. Originally, the logo was the ChatGPT logo, and it was the green one. And then they hit me up and asked me to change it, so now it's a purple logo. And they're cool with that.
Yeah. OpenAI is sending takedown notices to people with GPT stuff apparently now. So it's a little bit of a gray area. Okay, Alessio, any other stuff that we should plug? I don't know.
Latent Space.
Okay.
You muted me.
You muted, but he's shaking his head.
You muted me on Twitter.
Cool. I think that would be it for now. I do have like one person from Facebook, Samhan. You're welcome to come. I think this is it on for the main podcast. So everyone feel free to part ways. But I don't want to hear what Samhan has to say, because you actually are at Meta. If you're able to speak. Oh, did I mute everyone? I'm so sorry. I think
just got unmuted.
Sorry.
I know this is the end, towards the end of this, but I was just sharing Simon's post, and one thought I had is that if it is so easy to get started and modify these things, it's going to be impossible to regulate, and pretty soon data sets, models will be on BitTorrent, and people would be doing all kinds of things at home and then uploading models back onto BitTorrent, and things could just get completely crazy, and I want to hear what others think about this. Is this a plausible scenario? And
it already happens.
Would that make copyright irrelevant?
Copyright is still relevant, even though piracy exists. And it already happened with the llama weights were leaked via BitTorrent. So I fully agree with all this. And that's why I think Google is a little bit scared, because it's clearly that the number of iterations is happening so much quicker, and the amount of collaboration is happening so much more with in open source. Okay, I think that's about, we didn't want this to be like a dragged on discussion. This will be wrapping this up, cleaning it, and posting it on our podcast. And then I want to write more on moats. I think actually collecting and meaning to write a piece on moats. And today I saw the memo. I was like, oh, okay, like I guess today's the day we talk about moats. So thank you all. Thanks Simon. Thanks Travis for jumping on, and thanks to all the audience for engaging on this with us. We'll continue to engage on Twitter, but thanks to everyone.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Simon. All right, thanks everyone. Bye. Hopefully that was good. This is my first time.
Can you actually, man, this thing is a mess.
I'm sorry. I wanted individual recordings, and so I was like firing this thing up, and then I realized that I didn't turn on the separate recordings, because that's what I really want.
The first couple